lost a lot of the energy and action that made comics great. The other thing we thought, and again, through no faults, is that we've watched ourselves as editors, executives of the companies, we've watched the retailers, we've watched our fans get older. And we watched our characters get older with them. And what happens is now we've turned the DC into this generational idea, and we keep on getting further and further removed from what our core is about. And a lot of us just go back to what our strengths are, with our strongest characters, and really reinvigorate our line so that we feel we have the maximum way to reach as many people as possible. Because this isn't about just holding on to the core as tightly as we can. This is about growing our base and hopefully growing out to a point that we have a long, healthy future. But again, a lot of thought has gone into this, and my belief is that this is something that we feel is the right direction to go, and something that we feel we can grow from. We want to make sure the stories feel entry level. We want to make sure that all the stories are exciting. They're visually exciting. When you pick up a book, you get entranced, you get pulled in, and then hopefully stick around, because this is a periodic business, and we have to find ways to bring people back month in and month out. And that's the goal of all this. Okay, so let's go through the 52. What we did is we were breaking it out. We decided to break it down into 7 basic groups. Main reason why is that each one of them takes on its own personality and its own tonality. And I use this expression, we have what's called the unofficial reboot curve back in the office. And one of the reasons why we stayed away from the word reboot in particular is that it did not fit all the product. It did not explain what was going on here. These are not all brand new origins. This is not first-year stories, except in a couple of cases. This is really just the overarching line and a good entry point for every series. Gave us a chance to freshen up the costumes, gave us a chance to freshen up the tone and the attitude of the characters, make them feel much more contemporary with today. Again, these characters have been around for 50, 60, 70 years. And times have changed. You can't just be holding to where they were first created. And this is where I said, and hold them in ember like they were fossils. We need to update them, to grow them, so that they can be more relatable to today's audience. So the primary groups here are the Batman, Superman, Justice League, Green Lantern, Young Justice, with all our team characters, Edge, which is all the fringe characters, the ones that wouldn't be considered traditional superheroes, and then the Dark, which is more along the lines of the horror and mystery style stories that we can have. Starting with always, Justice League. The new Justice League series, which Jeff Johns and Jim Lee, and I'm sorry Jim's not here, because I usually do this with Jim, I throw this to Jim a lot, because he's been so involved in a lot of the creation of the looks, and the tone and the visual style of what's going on in the DC Universe. But unfortunately, Jim is actually, and unfortunately, happily, Jim is drawing Justice League right now. And you want to know where he's really needed, that's where he's at right now. But with Jeff Johns and Jim Lee, I think we feel we put the top creative team together for this series. This book is going to set the style and tone for the DC Universe. With Justice League and Action Comics, both those books are starting as basically year-one stories. So it helps reposition Justice League and helps set the tone. Jeff has described this with three words. It has heart, humor, and heroics. Remember? The good part about all that is that he really captures the style, tone of what we're trying to push throughout the entire line, especially with this series, and we're really happy these guys are on board. Moving. With this, we also have a Justice League International series, which is a nice companion book. We have it with Dan Jurgen and Aaron Lopresti, people who are familiar with the Justice League franchise, and also, more importantly, people who can also help complement the other series going forward. In this group, too, we look at the individual characters that really make up the heroes of the DC Universe. Aquaman, Jeff Johns, and Ivan Rice, and in this particular case, it's taking upon a lot of the themes set up in Brightest Day. Now, when I asked about the reboot curve, how do you go with, what is a reboot curve? Well, reboot curve's pretty simple. If a book is selling extraordinarily well or selling well for us, there's very little change that takes place. So with the Batman franchise books and the Green Lantern franchise books, we are doing well with that. I have to believe you are doing well with those series, and we wanted to put as little change as possible in those. But in franchises that we felt that were off track, or needed a real shot in the arm, as John had said earlier, we had more change take place because we felt those books needed it. And realistically, and speaking honestly, if the stories aren't working leading into that, if the stories haven't worked for a while, we're not letting go of anything that people are enjoying, and more importantly, with the hope of creating things that people will get excited about. We had to give our writers a level of freedom, our artists a level of freedom to be able to open up their stories so that they can do the best stories possible. And we spent a lot of time on these early issues to make sure that they capture a style and tone across the line that we think is going to be successful. Aquaman, again, was one of the most asked for series coming out of Brightest Day, and this builds out of the Brightest Day brand. This is a character I never knew that he wanted to work on. He had a completely new take on this thing, and we decided to let him go, and we feel we got a great spot for Wonder Woman. Also, some of the things you're going to hear from us, too, is the fact that there are certain things that you're going to be seeing right now that are not final. This is not the final costume design of Wonder Woman. We are holding pieces of information back because we know there's mass market appeal for a lot of these characters. We wanted to hold back final looks of Wonder Woman, some information on Superman, same thing with Batman. Keep characters that everybody knows or recognizes, so that way when we get closer to the actual print dates of these, we can roll it out and hopefully create walking traffic for all the stores on these things for people trying to find these books and grab them. A lot of collectability here. We're trying to build that sense back. Moving on, Flash. Flash was one of the books that was extraordinarily challenged with schedule for us. And that, I felt, hurt some of our momentum going into Flashpoint. And now with Francis writing and drawing, he understands the importance, and we all understand the importance of keeping schedule now, more so than anything else. I may have foolishly said at one meeting, but I will repeat it now. We are guaranteeing 100% delivery for all our books. Starting with September on, the only way we can win is to be there week in, week out. That's the only way this succeeds. We have to build that loyalty back with our fans. We have to renew that agreement that we have with them. That you know that the first week this book is there, and the second week and the third week, and that therefore they're not going to wonder when the series aren't going to come out anymore. Every book has to come out on time.
If Jim were here, he'd say that schedule is even more important than consistency of creative teams.
No.
What I would say when it pertains to Justice League is that both are paramount. Dan took everyone off the board and made sure whatever these creative teams were signed up for, they could deliver upon. We recognize the irony of Jim and Jeff being associated with this league book in Justice League, but you'll see in our hallways a system-wide recommitment to deliver.
But we just can't look at it and just do it as a hobby and put it out when we can. We have to be able to be out there and approach it with the same level of professionalism that people's worked on the books when we first got excited about comics. Putting the books out is paramount to this thing working. This whole process does not work if you don't have books to sell. Other series that we're building out the Justice League franchise. Captain Atom, a new position for the character, but it's still very familiar. Some new designs to him with J.T. Crow. Fury of Firestorm. Ethan Van Sciver had an incredible love for this character, and they're basically convinced Gail Simone to come join him. I'm glad they did. They have a really fresh take on that series. And Yildiray Sinard has some real sense of energy that he's bringing to the page. Again, very visual style. Green Arrow #1. Green Arrow's been working for us on Ties to Brightest Day. A lot of the same stays with it, with J.T. Crowe's the same artist. We've made some cosmetic changes to Green Arrow to bring the suit into the more is recognizable to what we saw in the Smallville series. Again, trying to touch upon things that people recognize so we can get casual fans interested in what's going on here. Hawkman is another character that's just on a little bit of a transformation, trying to bring out much more of the aggressive nature for our character. And with Philip Pan and Tony Daniel, we've got a great team on board. Mr. Terrific, I always point out saying something that gets me in trouble, so why not? But one of the things here is that when we decided to put JSA aside and to rest that concept and that franchise for a while, we knew there were a lot of incredibly strong characters in the Justice Society franchise that we wanted to keep on pushing forward. Mr. Terrific was the first one we wanted to give a book to. Again, what we wanted to do too is when you look at all 52 titles, you want to see the diversity of the line, you want to see the diversity of the world, you want to see something that's reflective of our actual audience base, not something that was created 20, 30, 40 years ago, but something for today. And I think Mr. Terrific is a great breakout character. We have a lot of interest in Deadman coming out of Brightest Day. That's the reason why in DC Universe Presents, this is an anthology book, and Deadman will be the first arc. Paul Jenkins coming back to DC for the first time. We're happy to have him.
Presents is a good reminder that just because a character is not in September doesn't mean that he or she has left the DC Universe.
Yeah, this is only the start. Only the start. Keep moving. Hey, so with Justice League of America, with Justice League, we were doing the origin of the Justice League. So that's almost like a year one for the DC Universe. And if you're looking at Justice League as year one, then Action Comics is almost like a year zero. We're looking at the introduction to Superman as really the start of the first superhero and where superheroes emerge. This book takes place before he comes into costume in the first arc. When I went to Grant Morrison and approached him to take over Superman to be the lead on it, I knew he was coming to a close on Batman. He still has a couple of stories left to be told, with the Batman Incorporated thing, but we knew we wanted to put on a key franchise. And as Grant told me, Superman's the one character he can write forever. So we believe that his level of commitment is here. Braggs is starting on the art. Another one also that we're prepared to work with other artists to make sure this book keeps the same level of quality, but more importantly, schedule. Can't miss. George Perez, also working on Superman. George, is one of those guys who has incredible comfort with all our characters, but also not afraid to make changes to our characters. And that's one of the reasons why we put him on this series, because we knew what he was able to do with Wonder Woman several years ago. We feel he'd be able to bring the same change to Superman. The way it works out is that the action arc and the Justice League arc take place prior to the rest of the line, which is still working in the same continuity moving forward. So those are working. I hate giving actual year numbers to it because everybody can figure out how everything fits in. But you have about a 5-year gap, say, between when Justice League premieres and then when the rest of the line is occurring. So much of what DC is, and so many of the great stories that DC had in continuity are compressed into that period of time, so a lot of things are still being used going forward. The main thing we didn't want to do is because we didn't want to do origins for year ones, we also didn't want to get into the habit of repeating old stories again, retell the death of Superman, retell whatever else you want to do, because ultimately we have really good stories that are sitting on a shelf right now, no sense doing it again. We got to be paving new ground with our characters. Superboy. Scott Lobdell's joining DC. He's also writing Teen Titans, you see that. And because the two books come across work together very well, he was very excited about working on Superboy. It's still tying into a lot of what was pre-existing Superboy continuity, but really building with the new Teen Titan franchise. Supergirl. This is one of the books we wanted to do an attitude change on. When I was mentioning before about our characters getting older, even our teen characters were being written as they were older, which is one of my greatest frustrations. I always used to say that they always felt like we have teenage characters talking about responsibility, integrity, inspiration, heritage, legacy, and it didn't feel right for teen characters, to be honest with you. It didn't seem like teen characters. Teen characters are more about discovery, exploration, and finding themselves than it is about just implementing other people's goals. And we wanted to refocus that sensibility. We wanted to get our teen characters to stop sounding like 40-year-olds acting like 20-year-olds or 12-year-olds. So one of the books that we're doing is we really want to bring a real teen sensibility to Supergirl. This is a girl who has a clear understanding of who she is, what she wants to be, and trying to find her place in the world, even if it is counter to what Superman might say or anybody else. This is somebody with her own individual identity, which we feel is much more identifiable for fans to see, to go on that journey with her. Batman Group. Again, I mentioned that Scott Snyder on Detective Comics has been doing a wonderful job for us. It is the one book that we've seen consistent incremental growth on over the last 6 to 8 months since he's been on the book. We're happy to have him on Batman #1. We're extraordinarily happy to get Greg Capullo on the book too, because we wanted to bring a really true, strong visual style to the series and to a lot of what's going on. And one of the things Greg does is brings an incredibly dynamic flair to Batman, which we think that helps those books really just break out. Batman is one of our strongest characters, and we want to make sure we have strongest teams possible on these books. Tony Daniel's been doing a great job for us on Batman. We just moved him over to Detective #1, and we're happy to have him on board still. We're also trying to push brand new characters into the mix. And one of the things about the Batman franchise, it draws a lot of attention, which allows us to push the diversity of the line too. Batwing is a character that had some interest and some success coming out of Batman Incorporated, and we had a wonderful take from Judd, and the way that Ben has been drawing it. We feel we have an interesting and more exciting book here. Okay, this is schedule. Remember the schedule problem, right? As I told everybody, no, this is not Dark Knight #2, just renumbered #1. This is basically David launching on the series. We actually sat down with David. We went up to visit him. We explained to him the importance of the schedule and the importance going on here. He understands what that is. He's already focused on pushing this series forward. He's already working on the first issue already. And more importantly, we have another artist who will be working with him in Jay Fabak. Jay is one of David's proteges, working at Aspen Studios right now. He's coming on to do some of the art on the book, or a major portion of the art on the book with David still writing. And what's more exciting is that David has taken on a sensibility with the series, which is much wider. And it's more of a team-up book, so we have a lot of other characters in the DC universe coming in here, which allows David to be able to write them and draw them. And we couldn't be more excited. But this book is coming out monthly. Again, guaranteed. Peter Tomasi on Batman and Robin. He's done a job for us right now. We're glad to have him step back on board. And Batgirl. The much talked about Batgirl book already. We thought long and hard about this one, and we've weighed this, and we've been talking about this series for such a long time at DC, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to do it. Whenever you ask anybody who Batgirl is, or anything in the media, or anything that you see, anything for other movies or TV or cartoons, they'll always gravitate to Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. And we knew that, but we also didn't want to discount everything that's happened to that character. But we're very happy to see, in working with Gail, which I feel is probably one of the most accessible first issues that we have. And more importantly with this one, the biggest thing that we're looking at is the fact that with Gail, she's been able to tell or integrate the Killing Joke story as part of the first issue. She's been able to work out from the point of where she was crippled to where she is now through the period of time of Oracle. And it's taken so much of what has been great storytelling around that character and applied to this book, which we feel really helps pay tribute to the character and really positions the character for the future. And it is beautiful. Batwoman #1. This book, for all the guarantees I make, this one at least I know I'm going to be right 6 times. Because we already have 6 of these in the can. Okay? To start, believe me. This is a book that was scheduled to come out a couple of times, and we just did not want to blow up our schedule, so we held back. And we knew this, once we knew September was coming, we decided to hold Batwoman to be part of this. JH has been working consistently for over a year on this series. So he's ready to go, this book is ready to go, and I'm really glad to have this again, showing the diversity of the Batman line. Nightwing, another character that people have asked for, another book that has been incredibly, one of the more favorite characters, which I found out the hard way. But I mean, the best thing about it is that we got Dick Grayson back in Nightwing, and we think this could be a real breakout book for us. And Catwoman, with the next Batman movie coming down the pike, and Catwoman is one of the major charges of this. We wanted to have a Catwoman series out there and built. And Catwoman has consistently been able to support a series of her own, and we're glad to have her back. And it's probably going to be one of the more sexy books of the DCU, you probably couldn't tell from the art. Birds of Prey. Dwayne Sikorsky stepping on board. First time writing for DC. We've loved his work that he's done for other publishers. We're glad to have him here and launching this. And we find a new mix to the team. There'll be some Barbara Gordon, but we really like the makeup that's in here with Katana, Black Canary, Poison Ivy, and this brand new character in the center called Starling. Again, another character that people have been looking for, Red Hood. We wanted to build him and build a story around him, so we have Red Hood. We got Roy Harper with 2 arms. And also, one last thing, and Starfire, which again, more different feel, different tone. We didn't want books that have repetitive types of messaging. We wanted every book to have its own sensibility, its own dynamics in regards to each purpose, especially with the team books. Next one up. Green Lantern. Okay. Going back to that quote-unquote reboot curve that I talked about. Green Lantern #1 comes directly out of Green Lantern Aftermath #2. Green Lantern Aftermath ends, Green Lantern #1 starts, as does all the Green Lantern franchise books. This has been our best and most consistent franchise for last year, even beating out Batman in places. We did not want to upset that apple cart, and if you look at the names of the teams involved, you'll see pretty much the same people working on these books as there were prior to that. Although, that is not the final cover to Green Lantern #1, there is a radical shift in the Green Lantern franchise. But we just can't show it, but it comes naturally out of the Aftermath storyline. So we're happy about that. Green Lantern Corps, continue to be a strong companion book. Green Lantern New Guardians, we've got a lot of love for all those colored rings, so we decided to want to put them in one book with one team, and that's Kyle Rayner in the center, also not the final cover. And Red Lanterns, another book that we had announced earlier on, but held on to this. So again, another one that I can guarantee. We've got a few in the can, so I'm happy about that. Okay, we move over to the Dark now. And the reason why Justice League Dark is here rather than the Justice League is because the writer involved, Peter Milligan, and the tonality of the story with Deadman and Shade the Changing Man and Madame Xanadu and Zatanna and John Constantine. Again, filling a lot of the mystery and horror aspects of the Justice League. But even better, we're hoping this can be a strong anchor for people who get drawn into other bits and pieces under the books under this group. The other strong piece of this, the other tentpole, is Swamp Thing. And somebody brought up to me at one of the meetings, they said, Swamp Thing has failed so many times. And I said, okay, but it's also succeeded a lot as well. And more importantly, it's one character that was able to support 2 movies. an animated series. It's been able to support so many, and a television show. So we know there's interest in there, there's awareness in there, and our goal is to make it as strong as possible with a writer like Scott Smager to show you that we are committed to these series. And if that's the flora side of the DC Universe, we go to the fauna side, which is basically Animal Man. And Jeff Lemire's got a wonderful take on the series, and he's feeding on a lot of the series ideas and concepts that were first done by Grant Morrison when he did his run on Animal Man. And this is the art by Travel Foreman, which we think is really breaking him out to be a real superstar for the DC. Okay, and if everybody, everybody's always asking, what's your favorite book, what's your favorite book? This is my personal favorite, okay? This is my, just the whole idea of mixing monsters and spy thrillers is just too good to pass up, and Frankenstein Agent of Shade is, again, a concept that was originally set in place by Grant Morrison, and Jeff Lemire's jumped all over and done a wonderful job. Some great looking stuff there, too. He's working in the Creature Commandos in this, too, so you really find a really wide array of characters in this that we think also helps broaden out what they appeal to DC. For me, DC Comics is never just about superheroes. It was about so many different types of storytelling, and we were trying to touch upon those, as many as those as possible. And when we launched out the 52 titles, just to show the depth and breadth of our line, and more importantly, the diversity of what we can be as a company. Somebody said, this one, you said, oh, you're a little late to the party. And I said, yeah, but the party's still going on. Empire Diaries, we wanted to be part of that. And Josh Bialkov is one of the key new voices coming into the DC universe. And this has been the Trenchmere book with a different tonality than we have. Resurrection Man, cult. This is one of those cult books that everybody keeps on asking about when you're going to reprint it. And I said, well, we could go about reprinting it, but let's try some new ones also. See if this could attract a new audience, considering this was a concept that everybody seems to remember so well. Demon Knights. Demon Knights is again, one of the more interesting takes for us. What we did is that we looked at the DC Universe as a whole, not just horizontally, but vertically. And when you're looking at it vertically, we wanted to show characters in different parts of time that interact with the DC Universe. So this book is actually set in the Middle Ages. And it's the demon in the Middle Ages, capturing a feel like you might see with Game of Thrones, or any one of these shows that really deal with any sort of the more sword and sorcery type of fields that are out there. We wanted to use Demon as a centerpiece on this, Paul Cornell as the writer, and this is a book that is firmly entrenched in the DC Universe, so you might see things happening in the Middle Ages that might play out in other books going forward. And now we move into the Edge, with the first book out there in the centerpiece of this book, also written by Paul Cornell, is Stormwatch. Stormwatch is one of the more recognizable franchises from Wildstorm, and we wanted to bring these characters into the DCU, but with enough change that people realize that they are part of the DC Universe. And the way we did that is that we're introducing Apollo and Midnighter as characters of the DC Universe for the first time in this book, and then to be part of the team, to firmly lock it in, we brought in Martian Manhunter. And you're going to see a different take on Martian Manhunter that's leaning much more to the Manhunter part than the Martian. And the other side is that you'll find out how Stormwatch has been layered in through the DC Universe through time, as you see this team being organized for the first time, but finding out that Stormwatch has a deep purpose on so many levels throughout the DCU. Another book that we've done, we wanted to bring Ron Mars back. We got Ron Mars on Voodoo. And Voodoo is another one, more of a sexy spy thriller, and we're glad to have him back to the DCU. Grifter, another one of those books that I identify as a potential breakout. Nathan Edmondson is a brand new writer for the DCU, new voice, new idea, a lot of excitement with this character, and we're pretty excited to have him on board on this series, which we think adds into so many layers of what the DCU is. Not a traditional character you've ever seen with the DC Universe. Deathstroke also working on the edges of it, on the fringe of the DCU, written by Kyle Higgins and art by Joe Bennett, who's done some wonderful superhero work for us over the years. Suicide Squad. This is where I usually throw it to Jim, and he justifies the change in costume for Harley Quinn. We said it had more to do with cosplay than it did actual sales, but in this particular case, we also wanted to show some change in our characters. And Suicide Squad is a franchise that people remember, and we wanted to bring an aggressive villain team as part of the DC Universe and pushing it forward. And they were looking for a leader, and this was something that was really driven by the creative team. These are the characters they wanted to use and the style they wanted to do. And we felt comfortable with that because they really fully understood the story they wanted to tell, and it worked really well for us here. OMAC, this is my chance to work with Keith Giffen. And the great part about Keith is that he's truly one of the great creators in comics for one of the longest periods of time that are out there, who constantly finds a way to reinvent himself, even if finds styles that seem extraordinarily new to a new reader, but very, very familiar to other ones. And this is some of Keith's best works of his career, and we're having a great time together. Black Hawks. We wanted to go with a G.I. Joe style story, show the normal person in the DCU, and that's what we got with this. And Men of War, we wanted to examine war today, similar to what was done with so many war books that were addressing issues in World War II. We really want to show how war has changed, how it's changed the face of the world, and more importantly, the face of the DC universe. This is interactive with the DCU, and we brought a subtle tie in that it feeds the grandson of Sergeant Rock as the lead of the book, but it also feeds the actual feel of war with the sensibility that's set in the DC universe. All-Star Western. Again, like Demon Knights was, this is the DC universe in the 1800s. And one of the first things you're going to see is Jonah Hex taking place in Gotham City, and books of Gotham City. Where's that next picture? Which is the one that Jim loves. There. Jim is actually working this setting right now into the first issue, or has worked it into the first issue of Justice League. And what he did was to show that there are elements that take place in the 1800s that actually still remain within Gotham City, just to show the continuity between our worlds. And that's a lot of coordinations going on, because we're actually taking our time to do this. We've actually spent a lot of time working on these books to make sure there's a better sense of interconnectivity between the books without each book feeling it's dependent on the other.
That station is now a Chipotle.
But the main thing we're trying to say is that we want every book to stand by itself, but to feel like it's part of a greater whole in order for the universe to work. Static Shock. Again, a book that we had scheduled early on, but we wanted to take advantage of it because we believe in the series and this character. And one of the things we put in here, we wanted to put him into the 52 launch so he has a better chance for exposure. We love what they're doing with Scott McDaniel and John Raza. And we changed some of the environment to put him in New York City now, so that we felt he was more in line with the DCU than in a city unto himself. Hawk and Dove. This is Jim. Okay, can I do Jim's story? I don't know. It's just not the same when Jim does it. Jim was telling us about how Rob Liefeld was out there tweeting about how committed he is to this book, and he showed footage of himself drawing pages of Hawk and Dove while driving to vacation. So it's literally him driving and drawing at the same time. We weren't sure if that was smart or really crazy, but it really... yeah. But we want to show the fact that he's extraordinarily committed to this, and he's one of those creators that definitely creates a lot of interest and discussion. And it's going to be interesting to see. It's good stuff. And Blue Beetle. Oh, come on. Blue Beetle is one of those books also that is a character we believe in. There's a lot of interest in him in regards to how he's been appearing in other medium. Again, it's also one of those books that we like to have just as a young, youthful tone that we feel helps really broaden out all the arcing DC universe. Okay, down to the last two. Legion of Superheroes. Paul Levis is writing, and even though you see number 1 on there, this is not a reboot, this is not a relaunch, this is a continuation of exactly what's going on in Legion of Superheroes right now. We wanted to give it a new number 1, but we did not want to restart this book in any way, shape, or form. There's only one major change that takes place, and that really is the fact that, the next slide, we have a new series called Legion Lost, and 7 of the heroes from the Legion of Superheroes are now trapped in present time. We've eliminated a lot of time travel in the DCU, so we want to do that fish out of water story. So we've got 7 Legionnaires trapped in our time, which means that those Legionnaires will not be appearing in Legion of Superheroes. But again, it allows us to get a lot of great themes that we've done from everything from Karate Kid to Booster Gold with a new set of characters. And there you have it, the new 52.
That's the new 52. That's the new 52. What titles are you liking? What did you see that you liked out there?
That was the first one I made it through without only one question, so I'm glad that by this time everybody's already caught up. That's a good thing.
What do you think?
Just waiting for you.
No, they're just waiting for me in the hole.
Your title. Yes, sir.
I like these non-traditional books, this Men of War or this All-Star Western. I think some of the more creative stuff you got going on. As for the mainstream stuff, I'm just super lost as to what's good continuity now and what's not. Green Lantern continues, but Justice League's different. What about where they met in the past?
Okay, it's easy. Each one of those things will be explained in each one of the series. The goal was to make, again, The last thing we wanted to do was start with an event feel, right from the start. It's the worst thing we can do, because if you're building just on events, you're only as good as your event, and every time you don't have one, you watch everything collapse. The goal for us right now is to create 52 titles that have the ability to stand on their own. They're still part of a connected world, but they have to be able to stand on their own. So what you need to know what's going on in each one of these series will be explained in each one of the first issues. You'll get caught up pretty much immediately. We at DC have what we call, a regular written down timeline for each one of these books that explain how we got to this point. What stories mattered, what stories kept. Not something we're going to share publicly, but something that we share with all the writers, particularly because that way they know what they can refer to as what matters. So where these characters first meet, something like that, you'll see some of the first meetings of the characters in the Justice League story so that we get that sense out of the way. But you're actually entering in where we are in most of the continuity and consistency of our characters. So in something like a Teen Titans, you'll get an explanation of every one of those characters of what you need to know in that first issue. Same thing with Superman, same thing with Batman, everything. You'll get a better sense of what's going on.
No recap pages are required for the first issue, but subsequent issues for sure, so that we can make multiple issues jumping on points for all types of readers.
Yeah, and one of the things we're looking at, rather than doing recap pages, because my biggest concern about recap pages is that you don't want to start with text as your opening page. It's rather boring. Again, you'll hear that word come out of a lot. But what you'll see now is going back to possibly a recap paragraph at the top, just with enough information to really get you reestablished, and really put the onus back on the writers and the editors to make sure that they reinforce a lot of the key story beats in the concept of the storytelling so that nobody gets lost in the process. We made so many changes on the very first issues alone for that reason. Because everybody has been working so long in the sense that everybody knows everything and they don't have to tell anything. That's why we've gotten to the place where we keep on shortening the amount of people who can get into what's going on, because it gets so self-referential. We want to get out of that habit and try to grow as much as we can. When it comes to Superman, well, Superman's going to be the guy that you're going to get the layout of the story. The very first arc that Grant is telling is really the origin of Superman's costume, how he gets that. But once you get to, at the same time, you'll be reading George Perez's Superman, and you'll get how his relationships, how his world works right from day one. And you'll get that all laid out. Again, we're going to extraordinary lengths to make sure we're as clear as possible with every first issue.
Dominic.
John, I was wondering, is there any plans for changing format, the actual size of the comic, quality of paper, printing, the physical issues with the product?
I haven't heard that addressed.
Yeah, no, and the answer is no. Reason why is that every time that we've tried to change something to the format, we've ultimately been pushed back into this traditional format. At this particular moment, until we realize whether or not this format works.
It'll match the current size?
Oh, absolutely. Everything matches. Everything's the same. Literally, there's only 4 books that are oversized in page count, which are higher price point. That's a Justice League, Action, All-Star Western, and Men of War. With Men of War and All-Star Western, you'll have second features in them, and with Action and Justice League, you'll have additional content to fill the book in.
Now, when they collect in the spring, there's a commitment to not come out with a small page count. There's a commitment to make sure there are stories contained. Daniel, take that regarding collections?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things we're looking at is the whole collection idea of how we're doing it. And this, I just want to be clear, is that we're not writing for trades, but we are building a trade. Meaning that if you're putting 6 issues or 8 issues in a trade, you want to get a complete story within there, but it doesn't have to be one complete story. It could be 6 individual issues, it could be 2 or 3 parters, it could be whatever we deem it to be, understanding what we're going to be collecting in advance. So we're pre-building those in our mind, but we don't want that to drive the storytelling. That's very clear. That's very important for us right now, because we want to make sure these stories don't feel padded or drawn out in any way, shape, or form. Yes?
So Dom, that warehouse you have of bags and boards, still good.
Oh, that's
after August 31st. You'll still have comics the same size to put in bags and boards.
And I
Now the tape is now completely different for taping bags.
Yeah. Yeah, but we've seen that this format is the format that holds, and there's no sense to upset that right now, unless everything's broken.
Dan, I'm just curious if the trade dress is going to change at all. Obviously, we saw some new logos up there. Is there going to be kind of a uniform trade dress for the entire line?
There's definitely more of a structure to the cover and to the layout, which is taking in a lot of lessons that we've learned over the years of where not to put things which get covered up when you rack. But we do have, there will be almost 52 new logos for all the books. There's I can say, look, I said, it's actually saying DC Comics now, more so than just DC. We want to identify clearly who we are. And then also there's some treatments that go on in each one of the families that are a little more subtle, but helps subtly bring some of these things together. Plus you'll see a reworking of how we position our number one, and our pricing, and all those things as well.
And for the collections, when we get to that point, in the spring, we're talking about having, tweaking the trade dress for those and possibly putting number ones on the spine of those so we can take the enthusiasm from September and move that into the spring and no, we're not going to put all 52 collections in 1 month. We'll skip ahead and we'll give you...
Would you say 1 week, right?
It'll be 1 week, yes. It'll be 1 week. It'll be the best week we've ever had.
Yeah, I have a lot of female readers in my shop that after they saw some of the costume redesigns and changes, especially with where Gail Simone was writing, they expressed to me concern that this new DC universe didn't seem aimed at them. And they were worried if they would have a place. I just wanted to bring that concern to you.
No, it's a valid concern, and I still think, my opinion is that everybody should wait to see what these books are and what comes out. I mean, quite honestly, I think we have more books out with female leads than any other publisher, or most publishers combined right now, realistically. And one of the things we do is we're very self-aware of how we have to position these books and make them work. We want to make sure that every story has its own sense of potential, but we want to approach female characters the same way as we approach male characters. I don't want to put them up on a pedestal. I don't want to put them as a representation of anything. We want to make them living, breathing characters on our sources. That means they have the greatest chance for success and the greatest chance for longevity. We're putting a lot of time and energy to make Wonder Woman break out big. Supergirl's an important character for us, but you have Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Batgirl, Batwoman, Voodoo, Birds of Prey. I mean, it shows a level of commitment there that I think is greater than any other publisher out there than make it a stunt. This is part of a line. Right over here. Oh, sorry. Wait, no, John. Okay, go.
You mentioned not wanting to build off of that. I just want to be clear on this. Flashpoint is not going to be a catalyst to this change?
We want to make sure that Flashpoint still stands on its own, that it can stand as a nice package for everything that it is. But also in Flashpoint 5, you see a clear spot where you understand where this starts from, and then a subtle piece at the end. But it wasn't, we didn't want to make it overt as to make it as the whole focus of the story, which it wasn't. It's more of a change that comes out. It's actually an explanation that we have, again, that gets us from Flashpoint into DC Universe. It's something that we hold for either a later story, but there'll be some subtleties of that at the end of Flashpoint that you can pick up.
So on August 31st, you have 2 DC comics that will be released. You'll have Flashpoint 5 and Justice League number 1. People don't have to pick up Flashpoint number 5 to enjoy Justice League number 1. But of course, as the guy in charge of sales, I'm not saying that you don't want to encourage them to pick up that. It's only 2 books that week from.
Yeah.
I mean, how little are we asking?
Sorry, because I'm going to go back to the second. You have a question right here.
My question is with the DC world itself. If I were to open up an atlas of the DC world, and the DC universe for that matter, how much will the new universe and world look different from the current one? Or will the cities be the same?
Everybody's pretty much the same. I mean, there's a couple of cities, a couple of fictional cities we might just stay away from. Like Hawkman was in a city called St. Roche, was for a while. Hawkman took place. We're moving Hawkman to New York, mainly because we wanted to ground him in more reality. Plus, there was the sense that the sweeping idea of Hawk coming down from the skyscrapers with the sun behind him created some great exciting visuals for us and presented them in a different light. But those are just more subtle changes. The DC universe as a whole hasn't changed at all. I'm still waiting. I'm still trying to drive to the DC universe when I get to that Commandy map, where Planet of the Apes is over here and Land of the Lions is over there, which is still my personal favorite map.
Is there going to be a refocus on possibly the content of some of your books, on what age groups you're writing for? Like, for a while it seemed like books like Teen Titans, which you would think would skew younger,
was not exactly a book I would want to put in the hands of maybe a 12 or 14-year-old because of either language or violence or something like that. Supergirl being the same thing. So what I'm saying is Teen Titans going to be an all ages book? Is it going to be T+?
There's very little T plus in the DC universe. There might be a couple of the Edge books with a T plus. We're very focused on keeping a T sensibility. It's very important for us to be as accessible as possible and wide as an audience as possible. Again, it's that fine balance, because also you have to think of what we perceive to be all ages from 20, 30 years ago might be a little different in perspective of what it is today, but we do not want to push things over the top. We won't be excessive. In areas we want to be as open as possible. It was a very key aspect of what was going in here, and there's, every once in a while you'll lose that line, but we're trying to hold it as tight as possible. We actually have, within ourselves, we're self-monitoring, and we've created a department which is basically keeping an eye on things to think if we go too high over. So that way we're more self-governing to keep ourselves within the classifications we create on our books. But a book like Batman or Superman should never go over a T. Teen Titans should never go over a T. Franchises that have more appeal than just comic have to hold a T number. They can't, a T letter. They really can't go beyond that because it limits, I think, their reach.